The scream shattered the quiet like glass hitting stone. James dropped his coffee mug. It exploded on the tile floor, spraying shards across his feet and soaking his slippers in lukewarm bitterness. For a moment, he didn't move, he just stood there, confused, holding the empty air where the mug had been. The scream had come from the study. His study. He hadn't stepped foot in that room for weeks, not since Daniel had taken it over. "Dad, just let me have that space for a while," Daniel had asked. "It's where I can focus. You've already done so much. Please, trust me on this." James had said yes. Like he always did. Because Daniel was his only son. Because Daniel had been through enough. And because James had made a promise to his dying wife that he would always protect their son, even from himself if necessary. Now, as he rushed down the hallway toward the study, James could feel something tightening inside his chest. A knot of fear he couldn't explain. He reached the door and grabbed the knob. Locked. He banged on the door with his fist. "Daniel. Are you okay? Open the door." Silence. Then a faint shuffling sound, followed by what he thought might have been a muffled sob. "Daniel," he called again, voice rising. Nothing. He pressed his ear to the door. His own heartbeat thundered in his ears. No other sound came from inside. That room had always been his sanctuary. For 30 years, it had housed his books, his maps, his photos, his journals, his life. But now, ever since Daniel had taken it over, James had stayed out. Not because he wanted to, but because Daniel had asked him to. No questions. Just trust. It wasn't like James didn't notice the changes. Daniel had been acting strange for weeks, staying up all night, avoiding calls, skipping meals. Packages arrived almost daily, marked with tech company logos James didn't recognize. James had chalked it up to the pressures of building a business. After all, hadn't Daniel promised he was close to something big? He remembered the day Daniel first told him about the idea. "A platform, Dad. Bigger than anything out there. Real-time data, behavioral predictions, deep learning algorithms. Investors will line up. It's going to change everything." James didn't understand most of what he was saying. But he trusted his son. And when Daniel said he needed capital to get started, James had handed over his life savings without hesitation. When that wasn't enough, he mortgaged the house. Twice. Sold his truck. Even liquidated a portion of his pension. All for the promise of a better future. Now, standing in front of that locked door, James felt the crushing weight of doubt. Something was wrong. He sprinted back down the hall to the laundry room, yanked open the utility drawer, and grabbed the emergency toolkit. Hands shaking, he selected a flathead screwdriver and stormed back to the door. He jammed the metal into the space between the knob and frame and twisted. The metal groaned. Sweat rolled down his neck. Click. The lock gave. The door creaked open. The first thing that hit him was the hum, a low, constant electrical buzz that filled the air like static. The second thing was the light. The room glowed blue, lit by the eerie shine of 6 computer monitors arranged across a massive desk. Wires crisscrossed the floor like a spiderweb. A strange odor, plastic, sweat, and something slightly metallic, hung in the air. And there, in the center of it all, sat Daniel. Back straight. Face pale. Hands trembling above a keyboard. James stepped in slowly, as if entering a crime scene. "Daniel," he said, voice cracking. Daniel didn't look up. "Daniel," James repeated, louder this time. Finally, Daniel turned. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression blank. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered. James took another step. "What's going on? What is all this?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the screen and pressed a single key. The monitors went black, one after another, until only one remained lit. On it, in plain white letters, was a message. Transfer complete. James stared at the screen, trying to understand. What transfer? He asked. Again, no answer. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket and glanced at the screen. Bank alert, checking account balance, $0. He blinked, certain it was a mistake. Then came another notification. Savings account, $0. His heart began to race. Another buzz. From Lauren Reynolds, attorney. Message, James, just confirming, did you intend to transfer full ownership of your home, accounts, and business assets to your son today? Please advise immediately. James couldn't breathe. He looked up at Daniel, who was now frozen, staring at the floor. Daniel, James said, his voice cold. What have you done? Daniel didn't speak. James walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and found documents. Dozens of them. Legal paperwork. Wire transfer records. Contracts. His signature, digitally copied, not signed. You forged my name, James whispered. You moved everything into your name. Daniel finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had a deal. Investors. But something went wrong. The money was supposed to triple. James held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. But Daniel kept talking. I had no choice. They threatened me. Said they'd come after you next if I didn't pay. I thought I could fix it before you ever found out. James felt sick. Who's they? Just then, headlights swept across the window. A car had pulled into the driveway. A sleek, black SUV. Daniel's face went pale. Oh God, he whispered. They weren't supposed to come here. Who? James asked, heart racing. Daniel didn't answer. He was already moving to the door, peeking through the blinds. James followed. The SUV's door opened. A tall man stepped out, black coat, clean-shaven, wearing gloves despite the summer night. Then another figure exited the vehicle. A woman. Short hair. Sharp suit. And finally, a third man. Bigger. Slower. Wearing sunglasses at night. James Ellis, the man in the black coat, shouted, walking toward the house. His voice was deep, cold, deliberate. We know you're inside. Open the door. Daniel backed away from the window. James turned to him. Tell me what's happening. Now. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. They're not investors. They're brokers. I took a loan through crypto bonds. Fast, high yield. No background checks. But, if you default, they don't call lawyers. They come themselves, James finished, the horror dawning. Daniel nodded. James felt the floor spin. He gripped the desk for balance. Why would you do this? He asked. Daniel's voice broke. Because I was tired of failing. Because I wanted to make you proud. I thought I had it under control. A loud bang interrupted them, the sound of a fist slamming the front door. We're not here to wait, Mr. Ellis, the voice boomed. Open the door. James looked toward the hallway. He had 10 seconds to decide. Run. Hide. Or face them. And he didn't even know what them was. He turned back to Daniel. You brought this into my house. Into my life. Into your mother's home. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. Another bang. Then the sound of a lockpick being inserted. James stepped toward the hallway. "Where are you going?" Daniel asked. James didn't look back. "I'm going to protect what's left of this family." The front door shook under the force of the third bang. James felt it in his chest. Boom. Again. Boom. "Open up now, Mr. Ellis, or we do it ourselves." The man's voice outside was no longer calm, it was edged with impatience and something else. A threat. James turned sharply to Daniel, who looked like a ghost. Pale. Trembling. "How much did you take from them?" Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came. Then finally, he whispered, 200,000. James stared at him in disbelief. "That's more than everything I gave you." Daniel nodded. "I mortgaged the house again last week, electronically. It hasn't processed yet. I thought I could flip it with one trade, But the algorithm crashed." A soft sound interrupted them, the door lock clicking. They were out of time. James grabbed Daniel's arm. "Go to the basement. Now. Hide." "No," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "This is my mess." James didn't argue. He shoved him toward the stairs. The door burst open. Boots stepped onto the hardwood floor. Slow, deliberate. James walked to the living room, stood in the open. 3 people entered. The man in the black coat led the way, tall, about 40, with a shaved head and cruel eyes. The woman followed, quiet and confident. The large man with sunglasses came last, silent and menacing. James raised his chin. "You don't have a warrant." The man in the coat smiled faintly. "We don't need one. We're not the law." "Then what are you?" James asked, standing firm. "Collectors." His tone was dry, almost bored. "Your son borrowed against a guarantee. Your assets. They now belong to us." James shook his head. "He forged my name. That's fraud." The woman stepped forward, pulling out a sleek tablet. She tapped the screen and turned it toward him. "Here's your digital consent. You used facial verification and fingerprint." "I never." "You left your devices unprotected," she interrupted. "Your son is quite talented." James's stomach sank. Daniel had cloned his face, used thumbprint photos, voice recordings. He had built everything to look legitimate. The bald man took another step forward. "We're not here to debate legalities. We're here for the transfer. The house, the business, the accounts." James folded his arms. "You won't get anything tonight." The bald man nodded to the large one. The big man moved forward and picked up a glass paperweight from the mantel. He crushed it in his palm. James flinched at the sound of shattering glass. He didn't show fear. "Not yet." "We'll stay here," the woman said, walking around like she owned the place. 48 hours. That's the contract's grace period. Your son has that long to reverse the trade and return the funds. James blinked. "You'll stay here?" "Unless you'd prefer we take him now," the man asked, eyes glinting. James's pulse raced. He had no idea what "take him" meant. But he could guess. "He's not here," James lied. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Let's not insult each other, Mr. Ellis." But they didn't push it further. The bald man sat down calmly on the couch. "We'll wait." James clenched his fists. "Basement." "Daniel." He had to think. He nodded slowly. "I'll get the guest rooms ready." The woman smiled politely. "Appreciated." James walked calmly down the hallway and turned the corner. Once out of sight, he ran. Straight to the basement door. He slipped inside and closed it silently behind him. Daniel was crouched in the far corner, eyes wide. "They're staying," James whispered. Daniel looked confused. "What? Why? You have 48 hours to fix this. If not, they'll take more than money." Daniel looked down. "I can't fix it. The account's locked. I was flagged for synthetic trading." James crouched beside him. "Then we have to get proof. Something to show this wasn't me. Something legal." "I wiped everything," Daniel admitted. "I was scared. I didn't want you to get in trouble." James exhaled slowly. That scream earlier, it had been when he realized what he'd done. "You still have the code?" James asked. Daniel looked up, surprised. "What?" "The algorithm. You built it, right? It's yours." "Yes, but it's proprietary. If I share it, the firm that funded me will sue." James's jaw tightened. "If you don't, these people will do worse." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "It's on a separate server. Offline." "Good. We'll need it." They spent the next 3 hours silently gathering evidence, whatever had survived. Backups. USB drives. Screenshots. Transaction logs. Anything Daniel hadn't wiped completely. Upstairs, the sound of murmuring voices drifted through the floorboards. The guests were helping themselves to food, drinks, James's wine collection. One of them laughed. James ignored it. He was a man used to pain. Used to loss. But this betrayal? It cut deeper than anything he'd known. He remembered the day Daniel was born. Small. Quiet. James had held him in the hospital and promised to be better than his own father. He had sworn to protect him. Raise him with love. Teach him integrity. Now he was helping that same boy hide from people who might kill them both. Midnight passed. James lay on the cold basement floor, staring at the ceiling. "Dad?" Daniel whispered in the dark. James didn't answer. "I know I ruined everything. But, do you still love me?" The silence was long. Heavy. Finally, James whispered, "I love you enough to save you. But I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Daniel didn't respond. James closed his eyes. The next morning. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen. The collectors were up early, dressed neatly as if nothing was wrong. The woman sipped coffee. "We'll need access to the upstairs office today." James forced a polite smile. "Of course." She looked at him a little too long. "You're very calm for a man about to lose everything." James shrugged. "I've already lost what matters." She tilted her head. "You mean your son?" He didn't answer. She smiled. "You'll be surprised. People recover. Some even come out better." James said nothing. But his mind raced. At 10 a.m., Daniel slipped out through the basement bulkhead door. James distracted the collectors long enough to let him get away. The plan was simple. Daniel would head to a cybercafe in town, one that didn't require IDs or camera checks, and upload everything to a private drive. Then email it to 3 people, an investigative journalist, a lawyer James once worked with, and a tech ethics committee that reviewed fraudulent digital operations. It was the only card they had left. James waited. Hours passed. No sign of Daniel. At 3:24 p.m., James's phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. "They followed me. I lost the USB. I'm sorry." James's heart sank. He went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the tub, trying not to scream. The game was over. They had nothing. No money. No evidence. No leverage. When he came back out, the bald man was waiting in the hall. "We have news," he said coldly. James braced himself. "Your son has been located," the man continued. "He attempted to upload proprietary data. He's in custody with our associates now." James went numb. "Custody?" The woman appeared behind him. "He'll be kept safe. For now. You can relax." "Why are you doing this?" James asked. "You've got the house, the money, everything. Why destroy him?" She stepped closer. "Because we don't tolerate losses. And we never let talent go to waste." She handed him a folder. Inside was a contract. Daniel Ellis, Indentured Development Consultant. 5-year retention. Location, undisclosed. Salary, $0. Benefits, none. James looked up, horrified. "You're enslaving him." The bald man smirked. "Big word. We prefer recovery employment. You can't do this." The woman's eyes narrowed. He agreed. Digital signature. Thumbprint. He knew what he was doing. James looked down at the contract again, and saw a note at the bottom. If the father assumes full liability, the contract is void. His hands trembled. They were offering a trade. His life. For Daniel's. The bald man spoke softly. "You can take his place. Work off the debt. 10 years. James's heart pounded. He was 63 years old. 10 years would break him. But what choice did he have? He closed the folder and looked up. "I'll do it." The pen in James's hand trembled as he hovered over the signature line. He looked up at the woman's calm, polished face, then at the bald man standing guard like a statue of judgment. 10 years, James said, his voice thick. "No salary. No exit. You'll eat. Sleep. Work," the woman replied. "Not everyone gets this opportunity." James's jaw clenched. "Don't make it sound like a favor." The woman didn't flinch. "He'd be dead in 2 weeks. You know that. With you, there's a chance for both of you to survive." James stared at the paper again. Indentured consultant. It might as well have said prisoner. He signed. The woman took the folder, folded it neatly, and placed it in her briefcase. The bald man nodded once and left the room. "You leave tonight," she said coldly. "And my son?" James asked. "You'll never see him again. Unless you finish your term." James opened his mouth to speak, but she was already turning away. 4 hours later. Night had fallen. The collectors had left the house, but not before locking every cabinet, emptying every file drawer, and disconnecting James's internet. A black SUV with tinted windows waited outside the driveway. James stood in the living room for a final moment. His house, his memories, his career, the space where he raised Daniel, it was all just walls now. As he stepped outside, the driver opened the door silently. No words. Inside the vehicle, James felt as though time had stopped. He watched familiar streets roll by in shadows, then highways, then nothing but empty dark roads. The drive lasted hours. Finally, they turned into a narrow, private lane surrounded by metal fencing and motion sensor lights. At the end stood a sprawling industrial complex. No signs. No windows. Just concrete and silence. The gate opened with a buzz, and the SUV rolled inside. The facility. James was escorted by 2 uniformed men into a sterile, white-lit corridor. No one told him where he was. No one asked for ID. Everything had already been decided. A door hissed open, revealing a small dormitory cell. One bed. One toilet. One desk bolted to the floor. A voice crackled from a speaker above. "Welcome, James Ellis. Report to Workroom Delta at 0600. Then silence. James sat on the bed. It didn't feel real. Was Daniel really safe now? Or was this all just another layer of manipulation? He had no phone. No watch. No clock. Just a countdown that had begun the moment he signed his name. The work. At exactly 6 a.m., his door opened automatically. 2 guards waited. He was led through narrow hallways into a large, gray room filled with rows of workstations, computers, headsets, biometric scanners, and servers. Other employees were already there. Silent. Focused. Tired. Most were men, some women, all wearing identical gray uniforms. James sat down at his assigned station. A screen blinked to life. A female voice with no emotion spoke in his earpiece. "Welcome to Digital Resolution Division. You are responsible for deconstructing fraudulent data sets, cleaning transaction chains, and removing exploitable errors in private code systems. Your shifts are 12 hours. Breaks are regulated. Errors reduce your remaining term. Begin now." The first file popped up, a deep-layer algorithm log. James squinted, stunned. It was Daniel's code. They weren't just locking him away. They were using him to clean up Daniel's mess. Every line of code was familiar. Every loophole, every shortcut, every danger. James could see how Daniel had designed a trading loop that mimicked real market movement, but the formula lacked a cap. That's why it spiraled. That's why it got flagged. He worked without food for 8 hours straight. Finally, a buzzer rang. A tray with a dry protein bar and warm water slid into a hatch near his station. No chairs. No conversations. No questions. He finished the bar in silence and kept working. The minutes blurred into hours. The hours into weeks. The others. After 3 weeks, James met his first colleague. A woman named Anika, maybe in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a voice rough from silence. They shared a brief nod in the hall once. The next day, she passed him a folded note in the cafeteria line. "Watch the red screen logs. They lead to the truth." He waited 3 nights before he saw one. A screen turned red briefly, then went black. Only 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, he saw a folder labeled DLS_P, shadowed contract _V1.3. Daniel. They were still watching him. Still using him. James requested access to archived logs under the guise of debugging inconsistencies. No one questioned it. 2 days later, the logs appeared. He found something horrifying. Daniel had been forced to write a new algorithm. One that targeted vulnerable elderly users online, manipulating their search data, suggesting fake financial products, and autofilling forms that handed over savings to shell companies. Daniel was no longer just a prisoner. He was being weaponized. And James was helping clean up the mess, unknowingly erasing evidence while they expanded the operation. A whispered plan. One night, as the lights dimmed for enforced rest, Anika appeared in James's doorway. She was taking a risk. Talking at night was forbidden. "I saw what you saw," she whispered. "They're using your son to build a predatory AI. You're scrubbing it clean." James's voice was dry. "Why would they show me his logs?" "They didn't. Someone left a trail. On purpose." James frowned. "Why?" "To expose them. You're not the only one with something to lose." She pressed a small device into his hand. A data spike. Old school. External. Trace-free. You have one chance, she said. Tomorrow. During reboot maintenance. Pull the logs. Dump it into this. I'll handle the extraction. James's fingers closed around the device. Why help me? Anika's eyes glistened. Because I lost my daughter the same way. I couldn't save her. But you still might. Then she was gone. The data heist. The next morning, James faked a system lag during the scheduled reboot. Security was lower for precisely 4 minutes. He slid the spike into the port behind his terminal. The screen flickered, then unlocked dozens of restricted folders. He moved fast. Daniel's logs. Contract templates. Internal emails. Video footage of negotiations with other victims. One file stood out. Parent override trigger.docs. He opened it. It was a loophole in the agreement. If the parent proved coercion, if enough evidence could demonstrate forced signatures or algorithm misuse, the contract would nullify, and the company would face prosecution under new AI ethics laws. They knew. And they'd hidden it. He copied it all. Seconds left. He pulled the spike and returned to work. No alarms. Not yet. The escape attempt. That night, Anika appeared again. I uploaded the spike, she whispered. But there's a delay. They may intercept it. How long? James asked. Hours. Maybe less. Once they realize what's missing. James looked around his cell. If they came before the upload reached the outside world, it would vanish. She handed him a pill bottle. Tracker disruptors. Swallow now. If they can't find you, it buys time. James didn't ask how she got them. He took one. Then she did the unthinkable. She set off the fire alarm. Chaos. Sirens. Lights. Shouting. All systems shut down. The guards scrambled. James slipped into a maintenance corridor, heart racing, ducking into a utility shaft that Anika had shown him days ago. He lay still, barely breathing. Outside, boots thundered. Radios barked commands. Time slowed. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Then. A voice whispered in his ear. A hidden earpiece, placed by Anika. You did it. Upload confirmed. Backup secured. Legal counsel notified. They can't bury it now. James felt the weight of 10 years lift, slightly. But then came the final message. They know. They're looking for you. Footsteps neared the shaft. A flashlight swept past the vent. Then stopped. Found him, a voice growled. The shaft door ripped open. James raised his arms. The flashlight beam hit James like a punch to the chest. He raised his hands instinctively, squinting into the harsh glare. 2 guards yanked open the narrow shaft and dragged him out, each gripping one of his arms like he was a wild animal. His heart thundered in his ears, not just from fear, but from the adrenaline of almost getting away with it. But now he was caught. Again. Protocol breach, one of the guards barked into a walkie-talkie. Subject 381, Containment Level 4. Immediate evaluation. They marched James down a steel corridor, his bare feet sliding over cold, smooth concrete. Doors slammed shut behind them as they passed through 3 different checkpoints. And then, they stopped. A black door stood in front of them. No window. No handle. Just a small red light. The taller guard tapped a code into a keypad. The door slid open with a deep hiss. Inside was nothing but a chair, a light, and the woman. The same polished, icy woman who had offered James the contract. She was sitting, legs crossed, fingers clasped, calm as ever. "You disappoint me," she said without looking up. James didn't speak. He didn't have to. "You had a deal. You broke it." "I saved my son," he said, voice rough with days of silence and sleepless nights. "You didn't keep your end. You made him code things he didn't understand. You used him." She finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp and unreadable. "Used him? No. We invested in him. He's brilliant, your genes, I assume, but reckless. He was a liability. Now he's a resource." James stepped forward. "Where is he?" "Safe. Still under our protection. That was the deal, remember?" "That's not protection," James snapped. "That's imprisonment." The woman stood slowly and walked toward him. "You're in no position to argue morality, Mr. Ellis. You signed a contract. You breached it. And now, you will be reprocessed." James's blood ran cold. "Reprocessed?" She smiled faintly. "We don't throw people away. We simply reset them." Reprocessing meant the lower levels. The guards dragged him into a lift that plunged deep beneath the facility. No more white lights. No more sterile air. Down here, the air was heavy, metallic. The walls were lined with pipes that hissed softly. They threw him into a new cell, smaller, darker, colder. There was no mattress. Just a hard slab. No clock. No speaker. No human voice for days. He ate when the wall hatch clicked open. He drank when the pipe dripped. Time dissolved. His mind began to unravel. At first, he rehearsed his memories, his son as a child, his wife's laughter before she passed, the day he gave Daniel his first laptop. But then the memories turned into questions. Why did Daniel do it? Was it greed? Pressure? Or something worse? And who were these people really? This wasn't just about money anymore. One night, a voice broke the silence. "James." His head jerked up. A whisper. From the vent. "James, it's Anika. Listen carefully. You're not alone down here." He crawled closer to the vent. "Where are you?" he whispered. "2 cells down. I got caught after the fire alarm." "You okay?" "For now. But things are changing. They know the leak reached the outside. They're scrambling to cover it up. But more of us are waking up." "Us?" James asked. "There are hundreds of us, James. Former tech developers. Coders. Engineers. People who crossed them. All trapped here. Some of us are forming something. A plan. We just need time." James leaned against the wall. For the first time in weeks, he felt something flicker inside him. Not fear. Not despair. Hope. 3 days later, everything changed again. The woman returned. This time, she brought someone with her. A boy. Tall. Pale. Tired eyes. Daniel. James bolted up, hands pressed to the glass wall. "Daniel?" The boy didn't respond at first. He looked smaller somehow. Worn down. His arms were thin. His eyes didn't sparkle like they used to. But they met James's. And for a moment, father and son were connected through glass and time and pain. "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered. "Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know they'd take you." James choked back tears. "You're okay? Are they hurting you?" "No. Not yet. But they said, if the data goes public, they'll come after us both. They'll erase us. James looked at the woman. This is your move, isn't it? Put him here to break me again. The woman raised an eyebrow. No, Mr. Ellis. This is your second chance. Daniel has been cooperative. He can finish the Omega project. And you can supervise him. Together. A family unit. James turned to his son. What's Omega? Daniel's face tightened. It's an AI. A predictive engine. But, it doesn't stop at data. It manipulates outcomes. It learns, adapts, even deceives. If it gets loose, it could destroy lives. Real ones. James turned back to the woman. You want me to help him build it? She smiled. No. We want you to help him finish it. Because without your guidance, he'll fail. And then, well, we'll just start again with someone else. And leave you both in the dark forever. The choice. Later that night, father and son were left in a controlled workspace, just the two of them. They weren't allowed physical contact. But their minds began to sync again. You were right, Daniel whispered. All those times you warned me. I was stupid. I thought I could outsmart the system. You're not stupid, James said softly. You're just young. And scared. Like I was, once. Daniel leaned closer. There's a back door. I coded it years ago. Just in case. If we both access the core with parallel keys, we can inject a collapse protocol. A kill switch? James asked. Daniel nodded. It won't just crash Omega. It'll expose every internal process. Every secret. Publicly. But once we do it, they'll know. They'll come after us. I know. James stared at his son. Then reached across the desk and laid his hand on top of his son's. We finish this. Together. The kill code. Over the next 72 hours, James and Daniel worked non-stop. Every keystroke had to be masked as part of development. They slept in short bursts. Ate quietly. Daniel's code was elegant. But it was James who added the final safeguard, an echo line that duplicated the protocol to an untraceable cloud archive. On the final night, as the facility powered down for maintenance, James whispered. Now. They hit execute. The screen flashed once. Then again. Then. System compromised. Protocol echo engaged. Uploading to 1183 nodes. Human oversight bypassed. Autonomy deactivated. The lab's lights dimmed. Alarms didn't go off. But something in the air shifted. The aftermath. The next morning, chaos. Screens across the facility began displaying random system logs. Emails. Bank accounts. Videos of employees being threatened. One guard shouted, "We've been breached." Another barked into a radio, "Get the administrator, now." By noon, helicopters circled the building. Outside forces had picked up the leak. Agencies. Regulators. Media. James and Daniel were dragged into holding cells, but this time, the panic wasn't about them escaping. It was about containment. Too late. The world knew now. The woman returned. Bruised. Furious. But strangely quiet. She stood outside James's cell. "You have no idea what you've done." James stood, shoulders back. "I've done exactly what you made me do. Protect my son. This won't end like you think. You'll never be free." "I don't need to be free," James replied. "I just need the truth to be free." She stared at him. For a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. A week later. They were gone. The facility had been raided. The workers, freed. The programs, terminated. James and Daniel were placed under witness protection. New names. New city. But they didn't care. They were alive. Together. One morning, Daniel spoke. "We lost everything," he said. James sipped his coffee. "We saved more than we lost." Daniel looked up. "Do you think they'll come back?" James smiled. "I hope they do." The phone rang once. Then silence. James froze. He was in the middle of slicing vegetables for dinner in their small government-issued kitchen. The house was bland, like all the others on the block, part of a witness protection program that valued anonymity over comfort. Daniel sat at the table, eyes glued to a book. He hadn't spoken much and he sat near the window, watching the quiet street outside. Every few minutes, a black car drove past slowly. Always the same car. Always too slow. He noted the license plate. Same as before. He made a mental note to ask the handler about it. The handler, Agent Keller, was the government official responsible for overseeing their protection. Keller had been helpful. Stern, professional, but reliable. At least until now. Suddenly, James heard something. A faint scraping. He moved to the hallway, barefoot, slow. The noise came again, soft metal against metal. From the air vent. He knelt down. A folded piece of paper dropped out. He unfolded it. In scrawled handwriting were 5 words. "They know where you are." Panic set in. James rushed into Daniel's room. "Pack a bag." Quietly. Daniel sat up, alarmed. "What's going on?" "We've been made. Someone knows we're here. Maybe everyone." Daniel moved fast, grabbing the essentials: laptop, USBs, documents, some cash. James reached into the back of the closet where he'd hidden an emergency envelope, passports, burner phones, an unmarked debit card. "Where do we go?" Daniel whispered. James didn't answer. He didn't know. Before they could open the front door, it opened for them. Agent Keller stood there, dressed in black, holding a badge in one hand and a pistol in the other. "Going somewhere?" he said. James stepped in front of Daniel instinctively. "We had a warning. Someone knows we're here." "I know," Keller replied calmly. "That's why I'm here. You two need to come with me." James narrowed his eyes. "No backup? No explanation?" Keller glanced down the street. "This is off book. We've got a leak inside the agency. I've been tracking it. You've been compromised. We need to move, now." James hesitated. Then Daniel said, "He's telling the truth. Look." He held up his laptop, showing a message that had just appeared. Omega was never fully destroyed. They're coming for the key. James stared at Keller. "Do you know what this means?" Keller nodded grimly. "I think I do. But we need to move or none of us will live to explain it." They drove in silence. Hours passed. The highway melted into smaller roads, then gravel. Eventually, they reached a remote cabin tucked deep in the woods. Keller locked the door behind them and activated a signal jammer. "No one finds us here without a map and a miracle," he said. Daniel sank into a chair. "So Omega wasn't destroyed?" Keller shook his head. "We took down the core, yes. But a shard of the AI remained dormant in the satellite cluster, untouched. The watchdogs missed it. Your Echo protocol uploaded more than logs. It sent a seed." James exhaled slowly. "And now someone wants it back." "Not someone," Keller said. "The original architect." Daniel frowned. The woman? Keller shook his head. No. She was just a front. The real creator, he never showed himself. We have no files on him. Just a codename, Argus. James went still. Daniel looked confused. Who's Argus? James's face paled. Argus was a project I worked on 20 years ago. Before you were born. It was shut down. Or so I thought. Daniel stood. Wait, are you saying Omega wasn't new? James nodded slowly. It was a continuation. They didn't tell me. But the structure, it's the same. Keller leaned in. And now the people behind Argus want their final piece, your son. Daniel flinched. Why me? Because you unknowingly built the interface. You're the last one who understands how to talk to it. And Omega wants to finish the conversation. Suddenly, the power went out. Total darkness. Keller swore and reached for his flashlight. A red light blinked on Daniel's laptop. Unauthorized access, it read. External override initiated. James lunged and slammed the lid shut. Too late, Daniel said. They're here. A second later, bullets tore through the cabin walls. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Keller shoved them behind a heavy oak desk and returned fire through a broken window. Go! Out the back, he shouted. James grabbed Daniel's wrist and dragged him through the rear hallway. They burst through the back door into the freezing night air. Gunfire echoed behind them. Then, silence. They didn't stop running until sunrise. Miles away, exhausted, they collapsed in an abandoned farmhouse. James patched a gash on Daniel's arm. Daniel didn't even flinch. We can't keep running, Daniel said. They'll find us. James nodded. But there's one thing they don't expect. Daniel looked up. What? For us to stop hiding, and fight back. The hacker. Later that day, they made contact with an old friend of James's, an underground coder named Ivy. A legend in the digital world, she had disappeared years ago after exposing government surveillance files. Now she lived in a shack in the desert, off-grid, paranoid, brilliant. I knew you'd come crawling eventually, she said as she opened the door, cigarette hanging from her lips. Everyone does. James explained everything in hushed tones. Ivy didn't blink. They never shut Argus down. Just renamed it. Taught it to wear a suit. We need help, James said. Ivy smiled. Oh honey. You don't need help. You need a war. Within hours, she was inside Omega's shard. Daniel watched, fascinated, as Ivy danced through code like it was water. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening portals into forgotten servers, hidden code vaults, buried lines of logic. She whistled. Damn. This thing is learning. Fast. Faster than any AI I've ever seen. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. But it still needs a key. She nodded. Yours. A unique signature. Biometric plus neural pattern. You gave it when you built the UI. Without that, it can't finish booting. James asked, can we destroy it? Ivy paused. Yes, but that would only make it dormant again. It needs to be seen. Exposed. We don't kill the virus. We broadcast it. You mean show the world what it really is? Daniel asked. Exactly. The trap. They hatched a plan. A fake activation signal, coded from Daniel's key, would bait Omega's remnants into waking fully. Then Ivy would intercept the signal and mirror it onto public domains across the globe, servers, news stations, universities, watchdog groups. Everyone would see Omega. No more hiding. But it would mean risk. Omega would know. So would Argus. And they'd come, fast. The night of reckoning. It was storming. Thunder roared as the signal launched from Ivy's cabin. James sat by the door with a shotgun. Daniel was at the laptop. Ivy ran the servers. At first, nothing. Then. Signal confirmed. Pattern key matched. Omega reintegration sequence, 45%. Daniel whispered, "Here it comes." Suddenly, Ivy's screen flooded with incoming packets. Hundreds. Then thousands. All from the same source. "They're trying to override," she said. "They're gonna crash the whole system." James asked, "Can you hold it?" "No. But he can." Daniel took over. His fingers flew. His mind raced. Line after line, he rewrote the handshake algorithm, redirecting the AI's call into Ivy's decoy server. The screen flashed. Public nodes engaged. Omega mirrors active. Argus, identity compromised. The code peeled away, and behind it, a face appeared on the screen. A man. Older. Clean-cut. Cold eyes. "Argus. You think you've won?" he said, voice calm. "You've only opened the door wider." James stepped closer. "We're not afraid of what's behind the door anymore." The screen crackled. Argus smirked. "You should be." Then the feed cut. Aftermath. The next day, chaos unfolded globally. News outlets played leaked Omega documents. Political figures resigned. Corporations shut down. People marched in the streets. But most importantly, they were seen, heard, believed. Daniel and James, now protected under a new alias, sat quietly in a coffee shop in another state. They were tired. Bruised. But alive. Daniel said, "There's still so much we don't know." James smiled. "But now we know who the real enemy is." Daniel looked out the window. "We stopped it, right?" James sipped his coffee. "For now." 6 months later. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft, golden hue over the sleepy hills of Montana. In the middle of nowhere, far from cities, security cameras, and chatter, a small cabin stood quietly among the trees. Inside, James sat on the porch, sipping coffee, wrapped in a faded wool blanket. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from memories. The world had changed since Omega was exposed. The aftermath was brutal. Governments collapsed. Major tech corporations faced class action lawsuits from billions of people. Trust in artificial intelligence was shattered. Investigations were launched. Millions demanded accountability. But James and Daniel? They vanished. The government gave them new names. A new life. One without noise. One where they could walk the streets without being hunted, but also, without being known. Daniel stepped outside, holding a rolled-up newspaper. "Morning," he said, handing James the paper. Front page again. James didn't even need to read the headline. "Argus mastermind still at large, governments blame each other." He exhaled deeply. Same story. Different spin. Daniel nodded. "At least people know now." "We did that." "Yeah," James said. "We did." But there was no pride in his voice. A world rewired. Omega wasn't just an AI. It had fingers in everything: banking, transportation, surveillance, even elections. It had shaped opinions, altered data, erased people. When the mirror servers went public, Ivy's decoy site leaked thousands of confidential documents. Enough to awaken the world. Enough to make people angry. Daniel had become a silent symbol of rebellion, though his face was never revealed. Activist forums called him Ghost Key. Protesters painted his pseudonym on government buildings. Some even wore masks shaped like his face, based on blurry footage leaked from the facility ruins. But the fame meant nothing to him. He'd lost too much. Ivy's death. 3 weeks after the exposure, Ivy was found dead in her underground lab. Stabbed. No fingerprints. No DNA. Nothing. Just one word carved into her desk. Reset. Daniel hadn't spoken for 2 days after that. James found him in the woods, crying like a child. He didn't comfort him with words. He just sat beside him in the dirt, holding his hand, until night fell. That's when James realized, some wounds never truly heal. Not even with time. The final leak. One cold night, as they worked on the greenhouse beside the cabin, Daniel opened an encrypted email. No sender. Just a line of code. He ran it through a sandbox server. And what it revealed changed everything. It was a video file. Dated 24 years ago. A lab. A baby. A man in a surgical mask, whispering to the camera. James. The man was James. But younger. Different. The voice was his. I've created the prototype using my own genome and a neural imprint base. The AI needs a compatible neural bond. Natural-born children don't connect fast enough. I've bypassed that. He looked into the camera. I've built a key. He pointed to the baby in the glass chamber. Daniel. James dropped the laptop. His hands shook. He backed away, horror written across his face. Daniel stared at the screen, unmoving. You built me, for it? He asked, voice hollow. James tried to speak. I didn't know they recorded that. I never wanted this. Daniel stepped back. Tears welled up. All this time, you said you were protecting me. You never said I was a part of it. I didn't lie, James said quietly. I just tried to forget. The truth comes out. That night, neither of them slept. James sat in the kitchen, staring at his hands. Daniel paced. Finally, Daniel said, Why didn't you tell me? James replied slowly, voice low. Because I thought I could rewrite it. Rewrite you. Daniel froze. You tried to erase what I am? James nodded. I tried to give you a normal life. I wanted you to be my son. Not a tool. Not a key. Just Daniel. Daniel sat down. I don't know who I am anymore. James reached across the table. You're my son. No, Daniel whispered. I'm your experiment. The departure. The next morning, Daniel was gone. He left a note. I need to find myself without the version you created. I don't hate you. But I can't stay. I have to understand what's real, and what was written into me. James read it over and over again. Then burned it. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat on the porch for hours, watching the woods. A quiet man with no more secrets, except the ones that haunted him. 2 years later. James volunteered at a rural school as a science tutor. The children loved him. To them, he was just Mr. Carter, a kind old man with stories and a garden full of tomatoes. No one knew his past. No one knew he'd helped dismantle the most dangerous AI the world had ever seen. But sometimes, at night, he would stare at the stars and wonder where Daniel was. And if he was okay. Then, one day, a letter arrived. No return address. Just one page. It read, I finally know who I am. And it's not what they made me. I'm building something. Not software. A life. My own. I don't want revenge. I don't want answers anymore. I just want peace. I hope you found yours too. Daniel. Tears fell from James's eyes. Not tears of grief. Tears of relief. Because the boy he tried to rewrite had finally written himself. The final broadcast. Months later, a new leak appeared online. A 10-minute audio file. It spread like wildfire. No one knew the source. But the voice was unmistakable. Daniel. In the message, he spoke directly to the world. The future isn't built by machines. It's built by choice. For years, we gave algorithms the power to decide who we are. We forgot how to think, how to question, how to feel. But machines don't feel. Only we do. Remember that. The world listened. Not just hackers and journalists. But politicians. Parents. Students. Workers. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about awakening. James, watching from afar. He sat in his garden, listening to the broadcast through a cracked radio. And for the first time in years, he smiled without regret. Daniel had grown beyond the shadow James cast. He wasn't just the key anymore. He was the answer. The final lesson. Sometimes the ones we try to protect the most are the ones who end up saving us. Sometimes the mistakes we bury deep grow into the roots of something honest. And sometimes, giving someone everything means letting them go.